The call came at 6:47 in the morning. I know the exact time because I was already awake, sitting at my kitchen table with my second cup of coffee, watching the light come through the window the way it does in October. Thin and pale, like it's apologizing for something. My phone buzzed against the wood and I saw my daughter's name and I felt it before I answered. That particular weight in the chest, a mother knows. Mom. Her voice was wrong, too quiet, flattened. I'm here, I said. Talk to me. I'm at Riverside Park, the one near the old library. I have the kids with me. A pause. We have our bags. I was already standing. My daughter's name is Fiona. She is 34 years old, a registered nurse, and the kind of woman who apologizes when other people bump into her. She has my mother's dark eyes and her father's stubborn jaw, and she has never, not once in her life, asked me for anything she didn't genuinely need. So when she told me she was sitting on a park bench with 2 suitcases and her 6-year-old and her 9-year-old at 6:47 on a Tuesday morning, I did not ask questions. I grabbed my keys. She was exactly where she said she was. The girls were on the bench beside her, the little one asleep against her sister's shoulder, the older one staring at the ducks on the pond with that careful blankness children use when they know something is wrong but no one has explained it yet. Fiona stood when she saw my car. Her eyes were dry. That scared me more than tears would have. I got out and opened the trunk first, loaded the bags without a word. Then I opened the back door for the girls. Then I walked around to where my daughter was standing and I held her face in both my hands. This face I had memorized before she could walk, and I said, "Get in the car, baby. We'll talk at home." On the way, she told me. Her father-in-law, a man I had met perhaps 8 times in 6 years, had shown up at their house the previous evening. Her husband, my son-in-law, a man I will call what he was, which is a coward, was there too, but said nothing. The father-in-law did the talking. He said Fiona had embarrassed the family. He said she had no idea how to raise children properly. He said, and these were his words, that his son deserved better than what she brought to the table, that her background was modest, that her people were not their people. He had the deed paperwork in his hand. The house they lived in was in his name. He had been clear. She was to be out by morning. Her husband stood in the doorway and looked at the floor. She had packed through the night while the girls slept. She had not called me because she did not want to wake me. She had walked to the park with 2 children and 2 suitcases and sat on a bench until it was light enough to feel less alone. I kept my eyes on the road. My hands were steady on the wheel. I have had 63 years to learn how to feel something enormous and not let it show on my face. This was one of those times. "Okay," I said. "Mom, I'm so sorry." "Don't." I said it gently. "Don't apologize to me." She looked out the window. The city was waking up around us. Delivery trucks, joggers, a man walking a dog the size of a small horse. "I don't know what I'm going to do," she said. I didn't say anything for a moment. The light ahead of us turned red. "I do," I said. What neither my son-in-law nor his father knew, what Fiona herself sometimes forgot, because I had never made it a point of pride, was that I had spent 31 years building something. I am an accountant by training. I started as a bookkeeper for a small manufacturing firm when I was 26, doing payroll and accounts receivable in a room the size of a closet. I learned everything I could about how money moved. I watched how businesses made decisions and I watched how they failed. By the time I was 35, I had started my own firm, just me and 1 part-time assistant in a rented office above a dry cleaner. By the time I was 50, I had 14 full-time employees and clients in 3 states. By the time my son-in-law's father came to my daughter's door with a deed in his hand, my firm managed financial oversight for 47 businesses, including 2 regional hospital groups and a mid-size logistics company headquartered downtown. I am not telling you this to boast. I am telling you this because it is relevant. What is also relevant, the logistics company was called Hargrove Freight Solutions. Its founder and CEO was a man named Preston Hargrove, who was 61 years old, silver-haired, the kind of man who wore cufflinks to a business lunch and called his secretary sweetheart without noticing. He and I had a working relationship that had lasted 11 years. I handled his books, his audits, his quarterly reports. I knew where every dollar in that company lived. And Hargrove Freight Solutions was my son-in-law's employer. My son-in-law, I will call him by his name, which is Warren, had worked in Hargrove's operations division for 4 years. His father, a man named Douglas, had arranged the introduction. Douglas had done business with Preston Hargrove for decades. They golfed together. They had that easy familiarity of men who have always had doors opened for them. I had never mentioned my connection to Hargrove Freight when I met the family. It hadn't seemed necessary. I was just Fiona's mother, a nice woman. Myest background. I poured Fiona a cup of tea and got the girls settled with cereal and cartoons. And then I went to my office, the small room off the kitchen that I use when I work from home. And I sat down and I opened my laptop and I looked at numbers I probably should not have been looking at, not yet, not without cause. But I had cause, and I knew what I was looking at. The thing about embezzlement is that it rarely looks like stealing. It looks like a rounding error, a duplicated vendor, a reimbursement that's a little higher than it should be. Most people miss it because they're looking for something dramatic, a big withdrawal, an obvious hole. The ones who do it well know that small and consistent is invisible. Warren had been doing it for 14 months. Not large amounts. Never more than $4,000 at a time. Vendor invoices from a company that didn't exist, routed through a shell account that had been set up with a slight variation on a legitimate supplier's name. One letter off. The kind of thing a tired accounts payable clerk processes on a Friday afternoon without a second look. The money went to an account I traced to a holding company registered in Warren's mother's maiden name. 14 months. 63 transactions. A little over $200,000. I sat with that for a while. Then I picked up my phone and called my attorney. Her name is Sylvia, and she has been my attorney for 16 years. And the first thing she said when I told her what I had found was, "Margaret, you need to be careful about how you obtained this." "My name is on the engagement letter," I said. "I have full access under our service agreement." A pause. "Send me everything." I spent the next 4 days doing nothing that looked like doing anything. Fiona and the girls settled into my guest room. I made pancakes on Sunday. I helped my granddaughter with her reading. I took the little one to the park and pushed her on the swings until my arms ached. In the evenings, after they were asleep, I sat in my office and I documented everything with the kind of precision that 31 years of accounting will teach you. On the 5th day, Warren's father called me. I did not recognize the number. He introduced himself with the particular confidence of a man who expects the introduction itself to produce an effect. "This is Douglas," he said, "Fiona's father-in-law." "Yes," I said, "I know who you are." He told me he was calling as a courtesy. He told me that the separation was going to proceed smoothly, that he had attorneys who handled this kind of thing, and that Fiona would be well taken care of, and that he hoped I understood this was nothing personal, just a matter of what was best for everyone. He said he knew this was hard for a mother to hear. I let him finish. "I appreciate the call," I said. "I'll be in touch." He paused. He had expected something else. Tears, maybe, or anger, or pleading. What he had not expected was a 63-year-old woman who sounded like she was closing a conference call. "In touch," he repeated. "Yes," I said. "Have a good afternoon." I hung up and called Sylvia back. There is a moment in any negotiation when the other person realizes they have fundamentally misunderstood the situation. I have seen it many times over 31 years. The slight shift, the stillness before they recalculate. I was not in the room when Preston Hargrove had that moment, but Sylvia described it to me afterward, and I have thought about it often. She had requested a meeting through formal channels. not as my attorney but as a representative of a concerned party, with financial documentation relevant to Hargrove Freight Solutions. Preston had assumed it was a vendor dispute. He had his CFO in the room and a junior attorney beside him, and the easy posture of a man who handles things. Sylvia placed the documentation on the table. She gave him 40 minutes to review it. At some point during those 40 minutes, Preston Hargrove made a phone call. Sylvia said she could hear the conversation through the glass wall, not the words, but the register. The shift from casual to sharp. The silence on his end when whoever he called answered, then a short exchange, and the call ending, and Preston sitting back down at the table with the expression of a man who had just learned that the floor was not where he had thought it was. Douglas had known. Not everything Sylvia believed, but enough. He had known Warren was supplementing his income in a way that would not survive scrutiny, and he had known that scrutiny was unlikely, as long as the right people remained comfortable, and no one asked difficult questions. He had moved Fiona out of that house not because of her bloodline or her background or her people. He had moved her out because she worked as a nurse and kept careful records, and he had noticed once, at a family dinner, she had offhandedly mentioned something about a billing discrepancy at the hospital, and he had decided she was a liability. When Sylvia told me that part, I had to set down my coffee. My daughter had nearly talked herself out of telling me that story. She'd mentioned it once, briefly, and I had not thought much of it at the time. But it had been enough. Douglas had decided she was too observant to keep around. He had underestimated her mother entirely. The meeting that mattered was not in a boardroom, it was in a restaurant, a quiet one, the kind with cloth napkins and a wine list and enough ambient noise that conversations don't carry. Sylvia had arranged it. Preston came alone. I came with Sylvia. He was cordial. He is the kind of man who is always cordial. He ordered sparkling water and spent the first few minutes talking about something unrelated, a project downtown, a charity event his wife was involved in, with the performance of a man who controls rooms. I let him perform. Then he looked at me and said, "I owe you an apology." "Tell me what you think you're apologizing for," I said. He paused. Then he told me, "Not everything. Men like Preston never tell you everything, but enough." He had known about Warren's activities for approximately 6 months before Sylvia's visit. He had not reported it because Douglas was an old friend, and because he had believed the situation could be managed quietly. What he had not anticipated, and I could see this was genuinely difficult for him to admit, was that I was the person managing his books. "I should have known," he said. "Yes," I said. "You should have." The terms we reached that afternoon were not complicated, but they were comprehensive. Hargrove Freight Solutions would cooperate fully with the investigation. Preston would make a formal statement. The restitution would be pursued through proper channels. In exchange, Sylvia had outlined certain considerations regarding the scope of the disclosure. Nothing that compromised the integrity of the process, but specific to timing and to which regulators received what information in what order. Preston was a man who understood leverage. He understood that morning that his options had narrowed considerably. Warren was dismissed from Hargrove Freight the following Tuesday. His father's access to the company's procurement contracts, 3 of them, worth a significant amount of money, was terminated concurrent with the investigation. Douglas called me once more that Thursday, and this time his voice had lost the particular quality it had the first time. "I don't understand why you're doing this," he said. "You put my daughter on a park bench," I said, "at 6 in the morning, with her children and 2 suitcases. A long silence. "She's better off," he said finally, and I could hear him reaching for something, trying to find footing. "Warren wasn't right for her, you have to see that." Douglas. I said his name the way I used to say my daughter's name when she was small and had done something she already knew was wrong. Quiet. No heat in it. "I don't need anything from you. I just need you to know that I know." I hung up. The legal process took several months. That is the truth of these things. They are slow, and they are procedural, and they require patience that most people underestimate. Fiona had a good family law attorney. I will not say the settlement was everything it should have been, because these things rarely are. But the house that Douglas had come to reclaim, turned out to have a complication. A deed that referenced an easement that referenced an agreement that, when examined by Fiona's attorney, alongside documents Sylvia provided, produced a conversation no one had wanted to have in front of a judge. The house question resolved in a way that gave Fiona options she had not known she had. The girls adjusted the way children adjust, faster than adults, with more resilience than we give them credit for, and with occasional unexpected grief that hits at the strangest moments. My older granddaughter cried once at dinner about her room. Not her room at my house, which she has decorated with approximately 900 stickers. Her room at the house she'd grown up in. I held her and I did not say it would be okay. I said that missing something you loved was allowed, that she could miss it and still be all right. She thought about that for a while and then asked if she could have more pasta. Fiona went back to nursing, full-time. She is good at her job in the way that people are good at things they were always meant to do. She called me one evening a few months after everything settled, and she wasn't crying. She was just tired in the particular way of someone who has been carrying less weight than before and is still getting used to the new balance. I keep thinking, she said, that I should have seen it earlier. You were living inside it, I said. It's different from the outside. You figured it out. I had 30 years of practice looking at numbers, I said. And I wasn't in love with anyone in that story. She was quiet for a moment. Mom, she said, how did you know what to do? When I called you from the park, you didn't even ask what happened. I thought about how to answer that. Outside my window, the October light was doing that thing again. Thin, pale. The kind of light that arrives honest. I didn't need to know yet, I said. I just needed you to not be sitting on a park bench. I want to say something to anyone listening who is in the middle of it. Not on the other side, not in the resolved part. In the part where you're on the bench, or in the car, or lying awake running numbers that don't add up in a life that doesn't look like what you planned. I know this part. I was 41 when my own marriage ended, and it ended without a park bench, but with its own particular bench. A specific awful moment where I understood that I had been making decisions based on information that turned out not to be true. I didn't have my mother to call. She had passed 3 years earlier. I sat in my office above the dry cleaner at 11 at night, and I looked at the work in front of me and I thought, this is still here. This part of me, no one moved. You carry more than you know. Most of us do. We are measured in ways we cannot measure ourselves. In the small decisions, the consistency, the 31 years of showing up and learning and paying attention. And sometimes, not always, but sometimes, the moment comes when all of that is exactly what the situation requires. I did not save my daughter. She had already saved herself by the time I pulled up to that park. She had gotten through the night. She had packed the bags. She had packed the bags. She had walked there. She had called me when it was light. All I did was show up and know what I was looking at. That is, I think, what we can do for each other. Show up. Bring what we know. Trust that the other person already has more than they think they do. The light through my window is different now. It is spring. My younger granddaughter is in the yard, talking to a bird that is not listening but also not leaving. My older one is inside reading a book with an orange cover that she will not tell me the plot of, because she says I will like it better if I read it myself. Which is probably true. Fiona is at work. Douglas has not called again. I have my coffee. That is enough. That is, in fact, everything. I have been thinking about what Douglas said on that last phone call. She's better off. He said it like a verdict, like he was the one with the authority to decide what Fiona deserved. That is the thing about people who have only ever used power to exclude. They genuinely cannot imagine that someone else might have been building something, quietly, for 30 years without announcing it. They look at a woman who shows up to a park at 6 in the morning to load suitcases into a trunk, and they see a mother running to clean up a mess. They do not see the 31 years of early mornings and late nights and decisions made carefully in a small office above a dry cleaner that turned into something real and lasting and, as it happened, directly relevant to their lives. That is what I want to sit with, because I think it matters. There is a version of this story where I am the hero, where I swooped in and dismantled the people who hurt my daughter, and everything resolved cleanly because I had power and I used it. But that is not quite right, and I think getting it wrong would cheat the actual lesson. Fiona got herself through that night. She packed those bags, she walked to that park. She made the call when she was ready to make it. What I brought was not rescue, it was preparation. 31 years of doing the work carefully and honestly, of learning how money moves and how people hide things and how institutions respond when you present them with documentation they cannot dismiss. I did not build my firm in order to protect my daughter one day. I built it because it was the work in front of me and I took it seriously. The protection came from the seriousness, not the other way around. That is the thing about integrity in the long run. It is not strategic. You do not maintain it because you know it will pay off. You maintain it because you cannot look at yourself in the mirror if you don't. And slowly, over years, it becomes the kind of substance that holds up under pressure. Warren and Douglas were counting on no one looking too closely. They were counting on the comfort of being well connected, and on the assumption that the woman at the accounting firm was just the woman at the accounting firm. They had spent years building the appearance of stability, while hollowing out the actual thing, and when the pressure came, there was nothing there. What I want to say to anyone who is somewhere in the middle of their own long years, the ones that don't look dramatic, the ones where you're just showing up and doing the work and wondering if any of it matters, is that it does. Not because the universe is keeping score, but because you are becoming someone. Every honest decision is a deposit into something you cannot see yet. Every time you do the careful thing instead of the easy thing, you are building the floor that will hold you when the hard moment arrives. I did not say Fiona. She was never as lost as Douglas believed she was. I just showed up with what I had built, and it turned out to be exactly what the moment required. That is enough. I think that is, in fact, everything.